Welcome to another episode of the Auto Buyer's Guide podcast. We're talking about the seismic shift in Toyota's lineup with an all-new Highlander and why it's nothing like what you've ever seen before. Also, do we have a few too many of what that new Highlander is in America? Without the tax credit, do plug-in hybrids make sense anymore? Conspiracy theories around Hyundai's Palisade being actually bigger on the inside than the grandest of Highlanders out there, and a whole manner of other topics, including a fast food diversion later in the episode. Let's roll that intro. So, Travis, I thought we should start out today by talking about affordability or lack thereof, and I think some of the unintended consequences we see in the auto market of this. For those out there that don't know, the average new car in America is now solidly over $50,000. And I don't know if you saw the news because you were traveling a lot, but apparently one of the VPs at Toyota was quoted as saying that instead of two price increases, the typical one at the start of a model year and then a one halfway through the year, that we should expect three price increases on Toyotas this year. So repricing every 3 to 4 months. And they firmly blamed tariffs and the cost of doing business for that.
Yeah, there have been a couple reports about the impacts of tariffs and what those have been. And then, of course, how it's going to hit the automotive industry has sort of been an unknown just because of the structure, almost lack thereof in this system, right? What parts, how many times crossing borders, if is it assembled here or, built here? Those are two different concepts. Here's where it gets tricky, though. Our job is to tell you how much things cost. And in 3 to 4 months, our numbers could be useless. That one is a little bit tough. I feel like I've seen somebody put a QR code that says these are the current pricing, but that's not great for anyone watching, and it's not great for consumers who are trying to make some of these decisions. So when the market is so fluctuating and when the prices of everything are so unstable, essentially, I don't blame them, but man, is that bad for the consumer.
Yeah, and it's only going to get more interesting. The twist with this is that I was recently driving the Porsche Macan Electric GTS, which is a whole mouthful, and
And
it's
super affordable.
super affordable. Oh yeah, starting at 105 something. But
Mhm.
what did really shock me was that Porsche is one of the few car companies out there, interestingly Subaru is another one, that really will talk about buyer demographics, what their buyer looks like, how much they make and
Yeah.
where they live and that kind of thing. And the shocking part of this is that the Subaru buyer for a new car and the Porsche buyer are on average not as far off as you might think, given the six-figure price tag of this Macan. For the
Yeah.
record, a Macan Electric can have over $70,000 of options on it.
Which
So
is
you
an
can,
expensive whole car in and of itself.
yeah, so you could take your $100,000 Macan up to 170 without too much difficulty.
Right.
And you can have it pretty quickly because they custom build in relatively short order. So shout out to Porsche for that one. But apparently the average new Macan electric buyer is in their mid 50s,
Mhm.
high household income,
Mhm.
suburban living, usually one or two incomes in the household. It seems like they skew towards the sort of 1.5 incomes in the household, talking averages there, mind
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
And the Subaru shopper, the only difference I could see is that the average household income for the Subaru Crosstrek shopper, which is the last one they told me about,
Mhm.
that average household income was only about $100,000 less than the household income for the Porsche shopper. But we're talking someone that's already making solid six figures on both sides here. So
Yeah. So
it
when
is
you think of all the
interesting.
incentive deals that come with financing,
Hmm.
those are people who don't need they really don't need to do any of the financing, but they say, "Hey, my
Yeah.
money invested elsewhere is gonna get a 7% return, so why not take 3% on a
Hmm.
72-month loan if you can find it?"
And I think this sort of reinforces something that I'd mentioned in the past, where when we're talking about family focused vehicles, because we do occasionally get questions from viewers out there about family focused things, since we try and jam car seats and everything we can and see
Mhm.
how well kids fit in there, etc. It
Yeah.
almost seems like a useless endeavor, like a fool's errand, because if the average new car buyer is 55 years old, and we're talking about a decent bell curve there, but
Mhm.
but a bell curve that is really steep on the ramp up because no one really is buying new cars anymore under 20 years old, and the old people are
Oh,
still
yeah.
buying new cars. So it's a pretty steep ramp at the beginning and a shallow curve on the other side of that average. if the average new car buyer is in their mid 50s, dollars to donuts, I'm betting that they don't have a toddler at home.
I mean, the best case scenario, and this is like a grand scheme thing, right? Is that if the new car buyer doesn't have children, then how do the second or third owners who do have children end up getting the right car?
Hmm.
The answer is grandparents.
Yeah. And that's when I thought to myself, this explains some of the weird feature non-feature things that we see in quote unquote family focused vehicles, because we have the Palisade hybrid out there and the Grand Highlander hybrid out there at the same time. Videos
Yeah.
coming up on both of those, and there's a
Hmm.
child seat video, just in case you're wondering, on the channel today by the time you're watching this video. um, the Palisade has a ton of room, and they obviously spent some time worrying about how do the second row seats move when a child seat's there? How does this move? How does that move? But then also, they made everything powered because they're trying to chase this affluent buyer into the
Right.
Hyundai portfolio. So then the seats are powered, so it takes a small eternity. And I don't know who's going to be there with their toddler going,
Not
"Okay,
really.
sweetie, let's be patient, sweetie. The seat has to do its thing. It's going to be whatever. I just want to get
Mhm.
it done and get the kid in and get out." Also, cup holders in the rear doors, I think, are the single dumbest idea I have heard of in quite some time.
I have to admit that's one that you kind of got me on board with because it's not something I'd ever thought of. I don't have any children, so it's never been a concern. I go, yeah, it's in the door, and then you remember it or you remove it on your way out. No, 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 that's not what children do. I think the
Mm-mm.
answer, though, to your moving seat problem is having a captain's chair set up instead of a bench seat. That way you can send the kid through the middle while the seat's moving. That's probably like the best case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But for some of these older folks who, my back is already not as good as it was 5 years ago, if you're trying to get someone in that third row, you don't necessarily want to carry them if they can move themselves. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't know. I don't think we're going to see the car specifically built for grandparents. I'm sure it's out there, but
I
I
think it's
think
the
that
Lexus
and
RX.
that makes sense. Yep, that checks out. But it doesn't end up being. It's not like nobody is going to buy them who does have families, and that manufacturers, especially something like Toyota, who has an enormous lineup, says,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, we've got the family car for you," because inevitably someone in their 30s or 40s will end up buying a new Sienna or a new Grand Highlander or the new Highlander and say, "This is my family car."
Now, what do you think has a greater share of blue hairs, the Lexus ES or the Lexus RX? Because I think it's got to be a close tie for those two, being the
Blue
oldest in
hairs,
the
help me
biz.
out.
You know, the old people with blue hair?
Okay, I'm just making sure we're on the same page there because
Yeah,
I know
yeah, yeah.
gray hairs, but you're talking about the fun hip ones. Actually,
Well,
yes.
just
I
back when there were shampoos that had that slight tint of blue
Sure,
to
sure.
excite your gray.
I think it ends up in the RX for sure. Not that nothing against the ES, but
Is that
sedans
because
are
it's
kind of
easier
on
to
their
get
way
in there
out.
once you've had a new hip?
That's exactly it. That's
Yeah.
exactly where I'm going. I think the ES, once you're in it, you go, "Oh, this is amazing." But if you're at the dealership and you get in and out twice, you go, "Oh, do I want to be elderly this?" And I think
Hmm.
that's when folks will look at the RX. I would take the ES, but I'm not yet one of those blue hairs.
And hey, not we're not elderly bashing here, but it is an
Mm.
interesting point, I think, because when we look at Palisade, and I really started thinking harder about it, because I think Palisade is a fantastic family vehicle. And in this pairing, Grand Highlander versus Palisade, I would take the Palisade because it is so much roomier. Also a shock, actually, I have to say. We'll
Mhm.
get on that in a bit. So much roomier than Grand Highlander for child seats. I thought this would be the way to go. But then there are those little twists inside that it's like, this is clearly not made for small children, even though there are these touches that are kind of going in that direction. This seems like the vehicle designed for families with teenagers or adult children. Like the
Yeah.
second row is really comfy. There's a lot of attention spent on the power recline and this and that, and the ventilated seats and the heated seats and the power sliding and reclining third row and this and that. And then you've got the cup holder where Orange Crush would be all over your lovely white interior. Also, there's the whole white interior.
Sure.
I'm sticking with
The
my no goldfish at the moment,
y
but I know
Yeah,
lots of people that goldfish all over. That
yeah.
interior would look like Donald Trump's face.
Well, okay, moving on. No, I'm going to hold you to that goldfish thing. For all our listeners, for all our watchers, from beginning, he said there would be no goldfish in this
No
vehicle, and
goldfish.
I don't think that's going to hold up. And goldfish is a category, not a specific, right? So if it comes in, it was a cheese it, and he goes, I said no goldfish. We're not
Hmm.
going to count that as an exclusionary subject.
No
That
Cheez-Its, no
said,
Cheez-Its either.
no, again, it's a category.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
the
yeah,
crunchy
yeah.
snacks or snacks in general. We can debate that later. I can tell you the Plymouth Voyager, Grand Voyager, whatever the minivan I grew up in, did not have power anything. I don't remember what the vent layout was. Obviously, I didn't care at the time. It was a manual sliding door. There was no recline in the seats that I can recall. And my overall comfort was never consideration for the designers. That's my take on it. So it's a different world. And you and I have talked about it. Some of our colleagues who have children say, "Oh, I want heated seats for the kids." And the kids who are in car seats, who they will be there for a long time based on the current standards, that doesn't do anything for them. And
Hmm.
I know my parents would never paid extra for heated
Yeah.
seats for me in the back. If I'm cold, grab a blanket, put your jacket on.
And
We can
also,
turn up
I
the heat,
I know who you're talking about now. And
but
and my comment to them was, and I seriously said this to his face. I said, if your kid is complaining about the lack of seat ventilation and seat heating in the second row and lack of seat heating in the third row, and you don't live in the Arctic Circle or the center of hell where you'd need the ventilated seat for
where
sure,
you could understand it for sure.
and you are giving into this as your car purchase, then you're a bad parent. Like, I just do not foresee a world where my kid is going to be allowed to come up to me and go, I demand whatever, because that's how it was phrased. He was like, oh no, you can't, you have to have that because, they demand that. My child demands that. And I was like, whoa, 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 who's the parent? Who's the child in this situation? Your child who is who is still sitting in a rear facing
It's
child seat is demanding seat
it's
heating?
not just car advice that you will get from Alex. You will get parenting advice and home improvement advice. Some of it warranted, some of it unprompted.
But to
You
your
never
point,
know what
you're
you're going to
you're
get.
you're being rational. Their butt's not on the seat that's heated. They're
Right.
like 8 layers of plastic and 7 inches away.
I would actually not be surprised if they had heated car seats in the not too distant future, and that one could almost make
Mm.
sense to me. But still, we're talking extra beyond extra, which is why we're losing affordability in the first place.
They're that's one of those bad parenting things, I think, because I thought to myself at some point on a cold night a few nights ago, I thought, it's funny that they don't have heated cribs. And then it occurred to me, I'm like, that's a really good way to cook your baby, though, because it's not like the toddler or the infant can go like, let's turn it off myself. I'm too
Hey,
hot,
can we
right?
drop
So
3 degrees here? It's getting a little toasty.
So yeah, no cooked babies. Let's not do that.
Right, right, right.
On the Palisade front, though, this did shock me, and this is exactly why we measure legroom the way that we do, and we measure legroom in every vehicle that we test. And importantly, the seat back to seat back measurement, I think, is really critical in what we're doing now. The Palisade is shockingly bigger than the Grand Highlander on the inside. And that really shocked me because on paper, they look like they're fractions of an inch apart in terms of legroom, with the Palisade having a little bit of a win over the Grand Highlander, and then the Palisade Hybrid being a little bit tighter. But the
Mhm,
battery positioning under the floor may adjust the legroom number, and this hold bear with me, everybody out there that's listening, because this is a
mhm.
tricky one. It affects the SAE calculated legroom number, but it does not move the seats closer together because the height of the floor and the height of the seat bottom cushion off the floor is a factor in the legroom measurement. So when we're talking about jamming child seats, this child functionality part, you have 5 inches more room between the driver's seat and the second row seats in the Palisade than in the Grand Highlander, with the front seat in the Grand Highlander in the same place in as the Palisade. So
Mhm.
second row seat slid all the way back, front seat adjusted 41 inches from the accelerator pedal on both of these vehicles. You get 5 inches more room in the Palisade. That is a huge difference.
Yeah, and the one of the other things that you're getting in some of these vehicles is how much movement you can get on the tracks in general. And then the fact that the second rows can shift, and even some of
Hmm.
the third rows can shift around. And that's one of my favorite features is, not every family is going to be built the same. Everyone's tall, everyone's short, or you're going to get this many in this category. Make those seats movable.
Hmm.
And that way, if you have the tall side, you can stagger, tall front, short middle, tall rear, whatever you need to do to make sure everyone ends up fitting. And obviously, parents should always be up front. They're the ones doing all the work. So, yeah, I think just adjustability and variety amongst
Hmm.
those seating positions is a big thing. And then, I hate to say it, we are losing the bench seat. It feels like
Yes.
it's harder to find a 7 or 8 passenger vehicle. Six, no problem, all over the place. And in that new Highlander, you can get, at least at the moment, you can get a bench seat in one configuration. That's the XLE all-wheel drive. So even the most affordable XLE front-wheel drive, at the moment, doesn't seem like there's a bench seat option. And I understand captain's chairs at the top end, even though you might have a large family and want all the luxury features. Again, look at the demographics. I'm sure there's some numbers there. But why is the most affordable model not the one that at least starts with a bench seat?
And of course, you're talking about the new Highlander, which has gone in a interesting and different direction now that the Grand
Yes.
Highlander has become so popular.
Yeah, so we are now fully battery electric, and it is kind of telling. I don't know, reminiscent of the beginning, because the Highlander was one of the first one of the first SUVs to go hybrid. Obviously, it was in Toyota's lineup. It went Prius, then Highlander, and now, of course, we have
Hmm.
all hybrids in the Prius and the Camry and the Rav4. But instead of the Highlander going all hybrid, because of how that Grand Highlander took off, and seemingly, I don't know if it's cannibalizing sales, but making less of a distinction between the two models, they said, hey, we're going to go Grand Highlander as the winner here in this internal combustion hybrid category. So let's take the Highlander a different direction. And I am curious about the naming convention. Keep the Highlander. That makes
Hmm.
sense. People know it for what it is. But they're building this BZ family of vehicles. That's what I'm calling it, because there's the BZ, which used to be the BZ4X. Then there's the BZ Woodland. They didn't go with BZ anything for the CHR. I still think that should have been BZ Sport. And why not call the new Highlander, the 27 Highlander battery electric, why not call that the BZ family or the BZ
Yeah.
hauler? Or, I admittedly didn't spend that much time on it, but BZ family, why not?
I think it's because they're really walking away from the BZ name, and the BZ Woodland is really just sort of the wagon version of the BZ, so that kind of makes sense. Same sort of thing.
Call it BZ Cargo.
Yeah, so it apparently was originally at some point in time supposed to be one of this alphabet soup things. It was
Hmm.
like the BZ7X or something like that was what the three row was supposed to be, and the CHR was supposed to be a BZ3 something, because we did see an early prototype concept thing of the
Hmm.
CHR and some early renders of the BZ, whatever the three-row BZ was supposed to be. And that's basically what we got, is CHR
Hmm.
and Highlander. But this actually does, before we dive into Highlander, because we should deep dive into that,
For
I
sure.
got this comment, or ran across this comment on the channel today, complaining about, oh, why is this turning into an all EV channel? Well, their EVs are a huge portion of new car releases these days, even though the shine has sort of worn off the EV rose, I guess you'd say, to
Hmm.
mix my metaphors there. The reality is that it takes a long time to stop a freight train, and that's what auto design is. So these cars
Yeah.
that started their design process 7 to possibly 10 years ago, the train's finally coming into the station, whether the station's ready or not, and whether the station keepers change their mind or not, we're rolling in. So there is not going to be, I don't think, a slowdown in EV models coming that soon. We've seen a few things be canceled or pushed off or hit pause buttons on, but there's still
Hmm.
going to be some pretty significant EV rolls into the station here, even though the trajectory seems to be changing legislatively in America, simply
Yeah.
because that's what was in the design pipeline.
I mean, and to further that question, let me tell you what I have gone and looked at over the last few weeks. It was the Volvo EX60, obviously fully electric. It was the Audi A6. That one's interesting because the 6 was supposed to be all electric. They pivoted, but it's just the A6, not the S6, not the RS6, not an all road, and they have one engine option. So even that, not that we're not covering it, but even that has been slimmed down. And then it was a Honda Prelude, so at least hybrid electric. Then we have a Pilot, which is a decent little refresh, and then an Explorer Tremor. Okay, that's a
Mhm.
pretty good variety. This week, I drove the CHR, the the BZ Woodland, and looked at the Highlander EV. And then, so that's four basically EVs right there.
Yep.
Then I looked at the CX5, the new one for 2026, and that has, again, one engine option. So you look at where the development is, where kind of the more
Mhm.
interesting things to talk about, because that engine is a carryover from 25. So it's just,
Yes,
in a
indeedy.
good way, it's a copy paste. So it doesn't garner the same amount of coverage. And that's just what we're getting put in front of us.
Let's get back to the Highlander for a second because the
Yes.
Highlander, I there are going to be a lot of Toyota haters that don't understand again how development cycles work, and we have to go back to that and remind everybody: 7 to 10 years on a development cycle. Even if a modern mainline car company outside of China is rushing, we're talking
Mhm.
4 to 5 years, absolute minimum for design, etc. Chinese car companies will go a lot faster just because they skip a lot of other steps, but that's for a different episode. Um,
Mhm.
the the reality here is that Toyota cooked up this Highlander thing, whatever the name was at the beginning. They cooked up this Highlander quite
Long
some
time
time
ago.
ago before they saw that other competitors in the mainstream were really chasing high voltage EV platforms and really fast charging.
Yeah, and that is going to be, I mean, if nothing else, where the Highlander I think is going to fall behind is that it seems to have the same 150 kilowatt charging as the rest of the BZ family, which
Mhm.
I think already is behind. And I don't say that 150 kilowatts is unacceptable. I think it's totally acceptable for most use cases. But if you're looking by the numbers, they are going to fall behind just about everything else that comes onto market immediately.
Mhm.
It's the new 50 kilowatts in terms of the charging standards and the expectations there, especially as batteries get bigger and vehicles get bigger. You don't get the same amount of miles per minute that you're stopped and charging. So it's a 400-volt architecture where a lot of its immediate competitors, which there aren't a whole lot of,
Mhm.
right? If you look at what is more of a mainstream line 3-row SUV, you look at Kia and Hyundai right away, but they're not on the same 400-volt architecture that we're looking at for Toyota on their brand new model against
Right.
some that have been out for a couple of years.
Yep. And I'm interested to see how do you think the third row especially compares with the Ionic 9?
So I was pleasantly surprised by the third row, though I have to tell you, we were told it has a couch style design to make it more spacious. I actually found it plenty comfortable, all things considered. You know, third rows are not the most comfortable place to
Mhm.
be. And I fit, and I am one who does not fit in many third rows very well, or second rows I don't really fit in. So actually, the space there was pleasantly surprising because it's not enormous. It is right in the same kind of spacing as
Mhm.
you find in the Ionic 9 and the EV9. Um, but I still think there's more room over in the Ionic 9. That's one where it's tough. You know, we take the
Yeah.
measurements, but we need a giant spreadsheet where I go, yes, I did fit, or no, I didn't, and you know those sorts of things to
Mhm.
try and remember
Mhm.
because there's a lot of cars we look at. But I'd say the space is pretty good. You'll be able to fit most people back there, but 6 seats or 7 seats, so no three across in the
Mhm.
bench in the back, and certainly very few three across in the second row.
Yeah, it's the big difference between these two I could see is this whole desire for road tripping, which I generally seem to dismiss. Viewers know that, but I would say in a three-row vehicle, there's probably more of a desire because if you are somehow this magical family that has young children that has decided to buy a new car even though you can't afford it because all the myriad reasons we've discussed, you
Mhm.
buy your new car because you want to go on a road trip, etc., because flying with two little kids is kind of a pain and it's a challenge, which is why we're road
Or
tripping to Los
if you
Angeles.
use or if you use your 3 row and you
Yeah.
have 3 kids or 4 kids, those are a lot of plane tickets.
Oh, nobody does that anymore. It's not the 1960s. At any rate, um, then the DC charging times become, I think, a bit more critical because if we're talking 300 miles of range, we're really talking 200 miles before you want to stop and charge because you're starting at 100%, you're going down to 10 or 20% to find that DC charge station. Your battery, if you're driving on the highway, of course, which is going to reduce your range from 300 down to 260, 250, whatever. So then you
Mhm.
pull into the station, you're going to have to be at that station for at least 30 minutes to recoup 150 to 180 miles of highway range in something like the Highlander. That is a decent amount longer than Ioniq 9, which is only going to take 20 minutes to
Hmm.
recover actually a little bit more range. And it's that spot above the curve where on Ioniq 9 it's going to take about 45 minutes to fully charge and recover that full 300 miles of range optimistically in the longest range single motor model on the highway, whereas on the Highlander you're going to be there, a lot longer.
Yeah, so it's really that under 500-mile trip where it's not going to make an enormous difference,
Hmm.
but over 500, it is going to start to add up.
Yeah. And I will say the in-laws live 110 miles ish away,
Hmm.
and but the over two mountain passes, well, three, I
Mm,
guess, actually technically three mountain passes away from where we are here. So you really need almost 300 miles of range to do that as a high EPA range, to do that
right.
journey from home to there and back without charging. So we cannot do it, for instance, in the Volvo EX30 because the range is just too short.
Yeah.
We can do it in the Chevy Blazer, but it's a squeaker because it's like 288 miles of label range. If you treat it gently and the
Yeah.
tires are fully inflated, you can
Right.
make it work.
It's not too
Especially
cold.
yeah, especially if you're visiting family members that don't have a place for you to plug it in, or you're just trying to
No.
top off on 110. 110 is not going to do a lot for you in a regular, just here's your grandchild, let's play for a few hours and got a split, go back home kind of thing.
Right.
And DC fast charging, it's kind of annoying when you've got children that are screaming, or you're worried about starting to scream in the back.
Mhm.
It is one of those things where I think it's easy to dismiss, and I was probably more dismissive of it before I had a screaming child of my own. I was concerned about it, but I think I am more concerned about it now because when the
Mhm.
screaming is starting, you're just like, we gotta get this to a place where we can make the screaming stop.
Address the screaming, yeah. And I think that is where I I'm so disappointed this technology is not already out. And it's going to be Stellantis who gets there first. It's the extended range EV, which is just a plug-in hybrid electric, but
Hmm.
the concept there is your everyday range fully covered and driven by
Hmm.
electric. But then when you hit the road trip, don't worry about charging, just go for a drive. And it's not nearly as efficient
Yeah.
as it is if it's pure electric or it's a hybrid, on its own. But that's what I think covers the mass adoption of EV powertrains and then eliminates the worries about this extended range driving. So you don't go, oh my gosh, I can't go to grandma's. There's not enough time in the day because I have to stop and charge, I'm going to get there, drop the kids
Hmm.
off. I'll run to the nearest charging station, come back. I think it eliminates a lot of those concerns, but all of that is just my assumption because it's not
Yeah.
yet out.
Riddle me this, Batman, though. Without without the tax credits,
Mhm.
is there a world where plug-in hybrids and EREVs, which is just a plug-in hybrid, everybody out there, is there a world where they make sense? Because I like plug-in hybrids, and I have plotted for a plug-in hybrid to be our next quote-unquote family vehicle for a while, but I don't know if I'm going to do that anymore because there's no benefit without the tax credit. The tax credit leveled the playing field and made these plug-in hybrids about the same price, generally speaking, as the hybrid equivalent. So if we look at the Hyundai Kia plug-in hybrids, they've got a whole slew of gas hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and in some cases, even an EV version. Um, and when you look across the board, the plug-in hybrid, you're like, ooh, that makes a lot of sense because like the Nero EV is more expensive than the Nero plug-in hybrid. But with the tax credit, the Nero plug-in hybrid was less than the hybrid. You get similar
Mhm.
fuel economy and you get electric range, so you can use the electric range most of the time and then, gas when you want to go on that road trip. Made total sense to me.
Right.
But of course, you know, uh, I mean, multiple problems here, which I am torn on the whole tax credit problem because, yes, it did spur the adoption of greener vehicles, which I truly believe in. I believe that most plug-in hybrids, contrary to the bad press that we've seen out there, I truly believe in the statistics and surveys that we do see where they are being used in the United States, not in Europe, but they are being used in the US. They probably do have a positive impact on emissions and
Mhm.
consumption, but they are also, as we just talked about demographically, a huge tax break to the wealthy because who's
For
buying
sure.
new cars and who's doing that section? It's generally the wealthy. So
Yeah.
that's a trick. But back on the actual mechanics of this, like why would I buy a plug-in Sportage over a hybrid Sportage if it's $7,500 more instead of just going, you know what, I'll just buy a full electric Ioniq 5 and rip the Band-Aid off.
So I think part of the answer to that question is actually another question we got from a viewer. We had Alex from Dallas call in. Let's go ahead and listen to what he had to say.
Hi, Alex and Travis. This is Alex calling from Dallas. I'm looking to replace my 2017 Ford Escape with something that feels a little bit more premium without breaking the bank. I've been really drawn lately to the redesigned Volkswagen Tiguan, and I'm curious if you might have any crystal ball insight to how the rumored hybrid powertrain would compare to the SEL R-Line Turbo in efficiency and performance. Additionally, with my annual mileage amounting to 5 to 7,000 miles, would a hybrid powertrain be worth the potential price premium over the R-Line Turbo? Thanks for all the great content. I look forward to catching the next.
So it's a great question, and honestly, within it, a lot that we can dive into. But for this instance, I want to talk about is the hybrid worth it over the standard engine option? And there is always a premium cost, right? There's more components, there's more built into this. And I consider a hybrid at this point a premium engine offering because for the most part, they are more powerful and they're more efficient. That seems like a premium option. So you're talking a little bit further. What about the plug-in hybrid? If it is a performance booster, and in a lot of cases it is, you'll get more power. This is assuming the battery is charged, not fully depleted in most cases. But it is going to be a higher performance option. That one starts to make more sense.
We're going to go air quotes here, I think.
Sure. Because it's also heavier and there's more to it. And again, you have to have it plugged in. Otherwise, it's just this dragging around battery. But for folks who looking for their daily commute, they want a little peppier, I think that's an option. But at $7,500 over the hybrid, not so much. $7,500 over the standard engine, that gets a little bit closer because that means it's what, maybe 5 or so thousand over what the hybrid is. If your electricity is really, really inexpensive, it can start to make sense. And part of my answer to Alex's question is yes, the hybrid makes sense, even though his mileage isn't enormous in a year. It'll add up, in this case, over 4 years instead of the first 2, something like that. But considering he has a 2017 Escape and it's 2026, he keeps his cars that long, so I'd say yes. But if you have long drives, really long drives, and you run out of EV range quickly, then you didn't save that much. And if your electricity isn't inexpensive like I have here, it doesn't make as much sense. And if you don't have consistent charging, if you cannot plug it in at home, it doesn't make any sense for you whatsoever unless you have a dedicated spot at work guaranteed to you every day, and that's where you plug in. So tax credit was a huge boost. At this point, it's just about the implementation of those plug-in hybrids. Extended range EVs versus a 20 or 30 mile plug-in, that makes a better argument to me because you will almost always be full electric. It covers that baseline what if, especially for the big concern, trucks and towing. But you also get all the benefits of EV power, where a lot of these, it's just a little bit of an EV boost if you're driving around in hybrid mode. And that's not an experience that's worth the extra dollar. So hopefully that covers all of it.
And it sort of depends on the plug-in hybrid in a way, because if we're talking about the Hyundai Kia plug-in hybrids, the hybrid drivetrains and the plug-in hybrid drivetrains in their mainline products, Sorento, Sportage, Tucson, etc., they produce more power, but there's really not a huge performance difference between them because of the added weight of the battery. So the bigger motors there are really just to help compensate for the added weight of the battery. Obviously, we have something like the GR RAV4, which is significantly more powerful than the regular hybrid model. So they're all over the map here. But you know what's even more powerful than, say, a extended range Ram 1500, a Rivian with the big battery pack and 1,000 horsepower. And by the time you've gotten yourself up into that plug-in hybrid Ram, I mean, oh my God, it's probably going to be about the same price as that longest range Rivian. So that gets a little tricky. Back on the Volkswagen question, though, I will say just briefly that we don't have any good idea about what exactly Volkswagen is going to bring us to the US because there's kind of a divergence in rumors. One rumor mill says it's going to be more like a 48-volt mild hybrid system borrowed from Europe, which would have a relatively minor impact on fuel economy. So don't expect RAV4 like fuel economy numbers. Expect it to be more like, a modest fuel economy bump like we see in the Volvo lineup, for instance. The other direction was a more full-throated hybrid system, which is probably going to trade a bit of performance versus the turbo engine that you find standard in the Tiguan. Probably going to trade a bit of performance for the fuel efficiency. Which one we get is just anybody's guess at the moment.
Yeah, we hate the wait and see game, but that's where we're gonna have to be on this one. Not that the base Tiguan isn't good in and of itself, where it's at, but if you're looking for the technological boost, whether that be in efficiency or performance, that one we'll have to wait on.
Yep. But this brings us to Dan, who wrote in answering our question that we posed to all of you out there, which was, why did you not buy a Volkswagen last time one was on your shopping list? Like, what caused you to turn away? So let's see what Dan has to say here.
So Dan says, last fall, I was looking to get an EV before the tax credit was sunset. We were looking at the 3-row full battery electric vehicles only, and only those with a real third row. No EQBs is the one he cited as not really qualifying. Ideally, we would have gotten the Rivian, but it was out of our price range, and they don't lease in Wisconsin, which is kind of interesting. Our options were the ID Buzz, Ioniq 9, or EV9. The ultimate went with the EV9, though we also considered the Ioniq 9, obviously a lot of similarities. I really love the ID Buzz, but it was just too expensive for short range. I think if the range was another 100 miles or the price was $20,000 lower, or both, it would have worked for us. Love the space, the interior, the style, and so many more things about it. Just couldn't justify it for the cost, especially compared to the Kias and Hyundais. Thanks for the great show. I always look forward to it. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thanks for sending us that in, Dan. So I guess in this instance, it was not exactly what I was maybe expecting. It was just a product not fitting issue. Because I know I've heard a lot of complaints about Volkswagen dealers, although that, Hyundai and Kia dealers actually fall into that same sort of complaint bucket where dealers are being blamed for the reason that people don't buy.
And in this case, it's possible Dan didn't quite get far enough down that line. He looked at just the numbers or went and looked at it in the showroom, but didn't spend a ton of time there. And yeah, again, it's by the numbers, which we kind of talked about in the Highlander EV. If someone says charging is super important, especially if they think they're going to do multiple road trips a year, likely they aren't. But if that's a concern, that's a reason to write something off pretty quick. And we've talked about the ID Buzz. You and I both love how much space is inside. It's enormous. I don't know if the interior feels as premium as the price tag is, but it's a nice space. It just falls short on a lot of numbers, and to the point of, I think it is worth writing off if you're worried about range in the slightest.
Yeah, I was torn on the ID Buzz because it was so roomy on the inside. I was willing to forgive it a lot of range, and even though it on paper is not the fastest charging EV, it does actually achieve some pretty impressive numbers because of how long it will stay at pretty solid charge numbers. It's like 210 kilowatts peak, but for a huge portion of its charge cycle, it was just hovering around 190 kilowatts. So it sucks down a healthy amount of power. It's not going to give you that headline 18%, 18-minute number or 15-minute number that a lot of people seem to want, but you will achieve a decent charge in 20 minutes that is totally usable. So if you're the kind of family that doesn't mind stopping every 2 hours on your road trip, the ID Buzz I think would be fine, because you'd be stopping for maybe 20 to 30 minutes every 2 hours. It's only gonna be over 120 miles though, mind you, but that is a workable range in my mind. To go from the Bay Area to Los Angeles, for instance, you'd have to stop at least twice, most likely, in that trip to go to Disneyland. Is that okay? Is that not? That's a tricky one.
It's not just the range, right? You look at the value of the Ioniq 9 and the
Yes,
EV9,
value.
and those are tough competitors, which is why I'm so curious and not concerned, but really tuned in to where this Highlander is going to come in, because that's exactly where it's landing, is against those Kia and Hyundai 9s. We already know it's going to be down on charging. It's not bad on range. 320 miles is what the top end is rated for, and I think that's where most people will probably end up. But can it undercut those in terms of pricing? And if it doesn't, what are they offering? What does Toyota think is making it worth a
Mhm.
little bit more than those Kia and Hyundais?
It's that question, is anybody interested?
Mm,
Because for the right price, I would say a lot more people would be interested in it. And this is one of those areas that I've talked about before. Cars can compete on price, they can compete on value, and they can compete on luxury. Those are my general three buckets there. And in
mm,
the luxury, we'll call it luxury slash performance. If you're the
right.
most luxurious or the highest performing, whatever, then you command any price. And a lot of things can be forgiven because the goal is be the most opulent, be the highest performing. If we're talking about uh, Corvettes, the fastest versions of the Corvette, you might go,
Mhm,
well, these products are better, quote unquote, and the answer is always, oh, but this one's faster. Or a Rolls Royce, and the answer is,
mhm,
but that's not a Rolls Royce. If we're talking about like a Nissan Versa, the answer is it's cheap. So people will
mhm,
say, but the seats are nasty. Yeah, but it's cheap. It's slow. Yeah, but it's cheap. It doesn't do this. Yeah, but it's cheap. And the problem, I think, in the majority of the car market is that most products fit in the tricky world of value, where it's
mhm.
what do you get for the price? And that, I think, is the problem that we're seeing now without the tax credit, is that these car companies are trying to figure out what that price tag needs to be for them to keep building the car that they've already invested billions in. Or you'll notice every car company out there is just writing off billions of dollars in expenses because they're going like, well, that no longer pencils out. So I'm going to be intrigued to see where Toyota goes with this, because if Highlander could be priced like a 2026 Highlander, that would be absolutely fantastic. If we could get an honest to goodness family EV out there
Mhm.
for 40 something thousand dollars, low 40s, it have to be under 45. If Highlander could be 300 miles of range, single motor, under $45,000, that would be the earth shattering vehicle that we need now in the electric space, because it's absolutely not where anybody else is. But
Right.
could they do it?
And I don't think so. It is an interesting trade off. So I mentioned that couch style rear seat, which is not something that it would normally highlight. Honestly,
Hmm.
weirdly reminiscent of the rear seats in the Honda Prelude, which is, yeah, we got them. We just not a high focus.
Yeah.
Obviously, it is better in the Highlander, but still the same kind of vibe.
Hmm.
But that feels like a value trade off because that
Hmm.
is nowhere near as important or concerning, especially not in an enormous 3 row, right? Where this is a very usable daily third row, but not the one you're getting to absolutely fill
Hmm.
all the time. But up front, everything is a lot nicer to look at, to touch. It's a different style, different design. There are accenting pieces that add cost that is not to be found in value car. So I do think
Hmm.
they're balancing that proposition. Again, it just comes down to what does it come out to, and is it really going to beat something out like an EV9? Because that starts in the mid 50s and it
Hmm.
goes up pretty quickly after that. So yeah, if you
Exactly.
can undercut it, that'd be amazing. If it comes in, excuse me, if it comes in shot for shot, word for word, uh, where's the advantage?
Exactly. If it starts in that mid 50, maybe even $60,000 range where we find the Korean options and the ID Buzz as well, then it's really going to be picked apart. Oh, the charging's slow. Oh, the third row's tight. This is whatever. If it was $10,000 less expensive than an EV9, I'd be like, who cares about that tight third row? Who cares about the slow charging? Show me something that does 3 rows at this price point. And that is the challenge, I think, with pricing on that. Also, the increasingly competitive landscape in a world where sales seem to be a little sluggish now, because we all know there's going to be a Subaru version.
Yes, and I'm wondering in that larger family. I want to touch on the powertrains for just a second, but the in that larger family, I bet you the Highlander will outsell the whatever strange name Subaru assigns to this one because their EV names have been interesting to say the least. But I do think the BZ Woodland alternative, the Subaru Trail Seeker, I think that's the one that is most likely to steal the sales numbers head to head because that is the electric Subaru Outback. And Toyota
Hmm.
said,
Hmm.
okay, cool, we'll build one, we'll put our name on it. But that one feels like it was built for Subaru. And here's where I'm going with that BZ Woodland slash Subaru Trail Seeker. The same powertrain is found, except for the batteries, in the Highlander as it is in the other BZ models. It's the same 221 horsepower on the front-wheel drive model, so not rear-wheel drive, which is what you get over on the Kia Hyundai lineup. 221 horsepower on a three-row SUV is not terribly impressive, but it's going to have good torque. So it's going to be slower, but I don't think it's going to be, oh my gosh, you can't drive this. The all-wheel drive, 338 horsepower, the same as you get on the BZ, the same as you get on the CHR, but it's not the 375 you get in the BZ Woodland. And I cannot for the life of me understand why you would not put the more powerful powertrain in the biggest EV you have in the lineup, especially since that BZ Woodland is not listed as a performance vehicle, right? They're not calling it the BZ Woodland GR. They're not trying to make it sporty. It's just the most powerful. That one seems a little bit weird. Maybe it's product cycles. Maybe it is. Maybe it is down to the value, and they're trying to keep things as affordable as they can. I don't know, but it seems
my
like
guess is they have to save something for Lexus, because the rumor mill points to not only having a Subaru EV version, because Subaru's president has also said that they're going to have a 3-row EV. We assume it's this one. But there also have been rumors about a Lexus 3-row EV. So there's probably going to be a Lexus version and a Subaru version and this version, just like Solterra, BZ, and RZ, right? So there's probably going to be a Lexus version. And my guess is that they don't want the Toyota version to be as powerful. So my guess is they're saving the higher output motor as the base motor in the Lexus.
So does the Subaru get access to the 375 motor layout, or is that going to be completely off limits? Because that would be interesting.
Yeah.
It also did seem strange looking at the spec sheets. Again, a lot of the same components on the other BZs, but the CHR, the smallest of the bunch, and the same power output as the other two, or less than the BZ Woodland, gets bigger brakes. And I thought, why would you not put those same bigger brakes on the Woodland? Because that one is seemingly the one that's going to be driven harder. These are just questions that I'm left with.
Yes, sometimes it's best not to try and apply logic to these things. And speaking of not applying logic, we have another write-in from Phil here, who is asking to see more Blazer EV content. He'd like us to talk about the ground clearance, how it is at off-roading, camping trips, more of a utility vehicle style thing. He found our ID4 versus Blazer EV comparison helpful and wants us to compare the Blazer with other EVs. He'd also, as a number 2 here, would like us to talk about the underside of the vehicle. As someone who lives in rural New England, sand and salt can have serious impacts on the longevity of the vehicle. He wants to know how they're constructed and protected underneath as a measure of durability in a nutshell. There, I didn't read the whole thing. But that last one, that's one of those logical problems. I had really hoped when we leased this office space to get a 2 or 4 post lift in the warehouse. That was not in the budget.
Yeah, and I don't happen to have one at my house either. Could be in the budget, but it would take up a lot of space.
Yeah, I would really love that, because that is one thing that we had talked about doing. More technical explanations, more deep dives in that manner. But where I am at home, installing a 2 or 4 post lift on a gravel driveway just seems tricky, to say the least.
Yeah.
Little unstable foundation wise, unless we paved. And here in the office, it's just a cost related thing. On the Blazer EV side, I will say I am bad at doing the updates that we ought to be doing on Blazer, etc. We do need to do more update videos there, because the Blazer EV does have a problem. You can't escape if you're a front passenger yourself, because there's something wrong with the door lock mechanism, and we just haven't been able to get it addressed by the dealer. It's been in 3 times so far, but we haven't been on top of it because I just don't have the time to do it. Pardon me.
Yeah.
And so someone, I don't know who that someone is, someone needs to just go down to the dealer, actually take the time during the day. It's probably gonna have to be me, and do the whole, listen guys, this thing's broken. It clearly needs a new door lock module. That's the problem that they haven't done. They keep taking it apart and trying to do the whole adjust and oil and clean and whatever thing, because they don't want to replace the part. But they just need to, buck up and call GM and get an actual warranty replacement part on that thing.
Yeah, I mean, not to dive too far into it, but if it's 3 visits for the same issue, isn't that getting close to lemon law concerns?
I would probably, I mean, I would have to look up technically how that goes, but I don't think there's been enough concerted pressure on this. And since it's mostly the lab's vehicle,
Hmm.
rather than our vehicle here on the car side of things, even though obviously we do content on it. I have let them deal with this. So when Ivan was taking it into the dealer, I don't know exactly what he said, and I'm guessing he
Hmm.
wasn't very aggressive about like, no, this is the problem. Because the first time it went in, they claimed they couldn't repeat the problem, even though
Mm.
it literally happens 9 out of 10
Every time.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like clearly you haven't spent enough time trying to get in
Hmm.
and out of this thing. And the way that this works is whether the door is locked or unlocked, it doesn't matter how many times you pull the inside handle, you just cannot get out of the car.
Mm.
Sometimes locking and unlocking and locking and unlocking repeatedly will sometimes help jiggle it loose, but usually you just have to have help the front passenger out from the outside.
Yeah, which is certainly not ideal. I mean, that's the what if you're stuck in the car, and this is just what if you're stuck in the car, period.
Yeah, you gotta lower the window and get out Dukes of Hazard
Right.
style, I guess.
Not exactly what you'd be hoping for on a brand new vehicle, but at least the outside one does work.
Hmm.
That's some sort of positive. And the Blazer covers a pretty big range. So yes, there are a lot of EVs that could be compared against it, but I will also say, we get a lot of people asking about EV comparisons that you and I would not consider as comparisons. They're maybe they're the same size, but they're nowhere near the same price, or they're somewhere in the same price range, but they're completely different vehicles. I think I might have seen one. I saw one comment on the Highlander. People coming from all different directions on things, but they said, it will never compete with the Model 3. And I was like, what? What are we talking about? This is there's
Yeah.
no there's no corollary here at all, except that it runs on battery, and that's about it. That's where things end.
And that is, I mean, that's unavoidable in the world of fans and Tesla bros, and I mean, but that applies to everything. There's always going to be a fan out there of whatever vehicle it is. And if we're talking, recent Facebook post on Palisade versus Grand Highlander, where we're talking simply about interior measurements in the vehicles, the Facebook post spawned all kinds of conspiracy theories about us being paid by Hyundai, about it being a hit piece on Toyota, and oh well, what about the resale value of this, and what about this, and what about that, and why are you comparing it to the wrong thing, and Palisade should be compared to Sequoia, and I'm like, in what world? Like, how does that?
Okay, sorry, you got me on that one.
Yeah, like
First of all, if those Hyundai checks are coming
yeah.
in, I have not seen mine, so you and I need to
No,
talk off air. But
like,
uh,
yeah,
the
it's like, but
Sequoia,
yeah, it's like, but also it would even look even better against Sequoia because Sequoia's interior
oh
is
my
really tight. So like,
god,
that's not a comparison Toyota would want. Trust me.
right, right,
Um, and there's still lots of reasons to get the Grand Highlander. It has even in the specific subject we were talking about, where you get second row seats that slide further forward to let you get into the third row more easily, and a much wider rear door. But there was this conspiracy theory that we had framed the shots differently, and that we had
mm,
really had the front driver's seat misadjusted somehow, and it was so much
mm,
further back, where really the reality is that in the Grand Highlander, the front doors are actually strangely small.
mm,
So something that I noticed a while back, and this time around when we actually have the Palisade in at the same time, it was more obvious getting from one end to the other. So I actually measured them out, and the front doors in the Grand Highlander average, depending on where you're measuring on the door frame, the door opening averages about 5 centimeters smaller than the one in the Palisade. It's about 2.5 inches or so. So and the front seat track is also, everything is aligned a little bit further rearward. So the front door's position on the vehicle itself is a little further forward than in Palisade. And the result is that my height with the driver's seat, the exact same position from the accelerator pedal. So seat bottom cushion all the way down, seat
mhm,
back at a 70-degree angle, just like the SAE legroom tests dictate, and then positioned 41 inches from the accelerator pedal. So exact same position in both of these vehicles. In the Grand Highlander, my head is right next to the B pillar, and if I turn to the side, you can really see a lot of pillar there. It does
mm,
affect side visibility for especially taller drivers, because they're going to be even further back and even more in that pillar. But there's a practical side to this. So there's the pros and cons to all these engineering choices that car companies have to work through. And in Grand Highlander, it is, where did those 2.5 inches go? They went to the door in the back. The back door in the Grand Highlander is enormous. So if you need to get big things in and out of the back, or you're a person with mobility issues, you got an elderly person that you're helping in and out of the car, you have those bigger car seats, which can be a challenge to dock in their docking stations, or kids getting in and out of them, or you want to slide that second row seat forward without folding it. You just slide it forward and you want to get into the third row. You can do that in the Grand Highlander because the door is so much bigger. So pretty much every inch of door that was deleted from the front was then glued onto the back door. And so it's not a conspiracy theory. The conspiracy theory in that case is, why was it framed so the Palisade's rear doors looked so small?
Because the Palisade doors are anyway.
We're being paid by Toyota to show that the Palisade has tiny doors.
So we do take our measurements, and some things it's almost hard to be fully objective on, because how does it feel? Well, let me tell you how it feels. And then how does it accelerate? Well, this one might actually be faster on paper, but this one feels faster. There's validity to that. One thing that I've found interesting is not just the size of the doors, but the angle of degrees in which they open. And I believe it was, and again, we drove 4 cars this week. I looked at 5. The CX-5 had an enormously wide opening door. Like, it felt 90 degrees open. And I went, my goodness, it stands out from something like the CHR, I think, early in the week, where there was not a whole lot of extra room on there. And some of the other BZs, doesn't mean you can't get in, but you look at this one and go, oh my God. But how do you quantify that? Well, you got to measure it to actually get that information.
Those are the best ones for suburban parking lots, because they've got a really wide fling. And so that way, even in those wider parking spots, you can just really give someone a good door ding, even if the spots are really wide.
Just get the momentum going and let it ride.
Especially if the door is pointy at the end, where it's really going to whack into something. That's
that hits a little bit close to home, because I've got a door ding on my Tesla here, and unfortunately didn't get captured on camera. But I'll tell you what, there was a little bit of momentum behind that one.
You know what I have a ding on, and that I do not understand. Still, no one seems to be able to know how this happened. I have a dimple on the A pillar of my Durango.
What in the what? Did you park it in your driving range for the golf course, or
and what? There's no paint damage, which is the weird part.
That's even stranger.
Yes, there's no paint damage, just pretty fucking big dimple there. And it's, how did this happen? Did like the world's largest seagull come down on, and it's on the side, so it clearly happened while it was parked. It's not like not like anything got, it wasn't driven into anything.
40 miles an hour from the side while you were on the road.
So I'm suspicious. I'm like, was there a delivery that happened somewhere and they're carrying something and it got whacked somehow? That's the only thing I can.
A baseball or a softball? Like, are you parking next to parks often? Is that a thing?
I am very sad. And then I also have a tiny dimple on my Grenadier, but that one was my fault entirely. The one flaw with the swing to the side doors, especially a big swing to the side door, is that if you have a trailer connected to your vehicle, as I often do, sometimes the trailer is in the way.
Crossover point, and there's a
With my flatbed, the spare tires hit each other, so that's golden. With my fuel trailer, that is not the case.
Not as much leeway. My Model 3 is coming up on 3 years, so I have a 3-year update. And you know what? I've got some dings and some things that happened. And unfortunately, when I filmed the first year review of it, I had a scuff on the wheel that was an unfortunate incident with a Taco Bell drive-through that I've never seen designed as poorly as this is. It's a weird have to swing out, but it doesn't look like it. And boy, did I get ridden hard in the comments about bad drivers owning Teslas, kind of the Prius equivalent, but I don't think
was it the comment on your Taco Bell habits, or
no? Well, this is the behind the scenes where I admit that it was a Taco Bell, but it was the drive-through. And just
this episode is sponsored by Taco Bell's Cantina.
Hey,
where you can get margaritas and dysentery at the same time.
I am available, and I'm for sale. for the right price to the right brand. We're not doing automotive, but Taco Bell, that's still
I
on
do
board.
love me some Taco Bell though. Mostly the quesadilla and a burrito supreme. But
Taco Bell is for a fast food that is maybe not food. I know what we're doing. They are one of the lower calorie options. If you're like, hey, I have to stop somewhere, I need some food, because it's not all deep fried. It can be on the healthier side when you're looking at the calorie numbers. Who knows how real any of the other food is. And also, that is another fun fact. One of the commonalities between Alex and I is that Taco Bell guilty pleasure.
I kind of want an Indian Taco Bell though. I think that we could jam tikka masala and some lamb korma and Rogan Josh into the same shapes, and we could nonify it, and we could have I don't know what their tagline would be, but yeah, I think we need Indian Bell.
Well, so when you said, so we all know that the tortilla is just a delivery system, and it's my favorite delivery system at the moment, whether it be in chip form or regular tortilla form. When you said Indian Taco Bell, I thought fry bread Taco Bell, and I think that is probably an option as well. But that's why you listen to this podcast, because every once in a while you get some behind the scenes.
Yes, and for those out there that are like, that wouldn't be real Indian food, that would be, I mean, that's not like that's the point, but yeah, it wouldn't be, and that's Taco Bell. I mean,
Taco Bell is not real Mexican food.
No one's going to Taco Bell because it's Mexican food.
You're like, I'm looking for some good Mexican tonight. Let's hit the Taco Bell.
No, you're going looking for Taco Bell, not for Mexican food. These are
Taco Bell is a food genre in and of itself. It's its own grouping. Right,
two separt constructs here.
It does not show up on your food pyramid. It is its own entity.
Yeah, exactly. No one's going to Long John Silver because they really want a British pub experience. Let's put it that way, right? It's not the fish sticks you're looking for. Well, I think that's about all we have time for today, Travis. So we will see everybody and talk to everybody hopefully next week, where I think you and I might be able to record an on-location podcast while we're Jeeping or Subaruing or doing one of those things.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
See everybody next week.
Adios.